Montana Territory. August 1883. They called her Bad Luck before they even learned her name. Oriana Fields stepped off the stagecoach with a carpetbag in one hand and nothing but dust and suspicion in the other. The town of Bridgers Pass sat hot and tight under the sun, its wooden buildings leaning into the wind like old men with secrets. No one greeted her. No one offered a hand. When the wheel of the coach snapped just after she stepped down, a man muttered, "Figures," and walked away. She had been in town less than 5 minutes. The whispers started fast. Widow maker, storm bringer, bad luck. No one knew the full story, but stories had a way of growing teeth in towns like this. All they knew was that she had buried both her parents, her husband, and her newborn daughter within 5 years. That she came west alone, quiet and too pretty for her own good. That she walked like she was bracing for something else to go wrong. And then there was the fire. She had rented a room above the bakery. 3 nights in, the chimney sparked and the whole place caught. No one was hurt, but the baker's wife pointed at Oriana with shaking hands and said, "She brought it. I felt it when she walked in." The townsfolk didn't argue. They didn't burn her at the stake, but they might as well have. Every door closed after that. Every eye turned cold. Oriana stopped trying to explain. She just walked, kept to herself, and tried not to shrink beneath the weight of it all, until she met Holden Vance. He came into town once a week for supplies, tall, sun-browned, and quiet in a way that made people lean in to listen. People said he had buried his wife 3 winters ago, that he raised 2 kids out on his land south of town. He did not talk much, but when he did, people listened. The town respected him, so when he found Oriana sitting on the church steps late one evening, her lips split from a fall and her bag clutched to her chest, he did not ask what had happened. "You have anyone?" he asked instead. She shook her head. "Not anymore." "Come on," he said. "You are coming with me," she blinked. "Why?" "Because I have 2 kids and they deserve to see what kindness looks like." The wagon ride to his ranch was quiet. Stars spilled across the sky like spilled sugar. Oriana sat stiffly beside him, not used to being offered anything without a price. She watched his hands on the reins, steady, weathered, strong. His ranch was small but clean. A 2-bedroom house with a lean-to barn, a chicken coop, and hills that rolled out like a patchwork quilt. His daughter, Tessa, was 9. His son, Tobias, was 6. They peeked from behind the door when Oriana stepped inside, wide-eyed and curious. "Kids, this is Miss Oriana," Holden said. "She is staying with us a while." Tessa nodded like it made perfect sense. "Do you know how to make biscuits?" Oriana blinked. "Yes." "Then you are family now," she said, and walked off. Tobias handed her a dandelion he had picked from the yard. That night, Oriana laid in a real bed for the first time in weeks. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the wind whisper through the cracks. She told herself not to get used to it. That kindness like this never lasted. That people like her, people who lost too much, were not meant to be kept. But the days passed, and no one asked her to leave. She swept the floors. She mended Tessa's torn dress. She helped Holden with the goats, her hands blistering under the work but her spirit lifting with every sunrise. She laughed once, just once, and it startled her so badly she clapped a hand over her mouth like it was a sin. Holden noticed. "You should laugh more," he said one night on the porch when the kids had gone to bed and the crickets sang low. "I forgot how," she said. "I will help you remember." He said it like a promise. The town did not know what to make of it. Some said Holden had lost his mind. Others said he was too lonely to see straight. But when Oriana came into town with Tessa's hand in hers and Tobias riding on her hip, people looked twice. When she smiled at Holden and he smiled back without shame or hesitation, they looked a third time. And when the dry season hit and Holden's well ran dry, it was Oriana who found the underground stream that saved their land. She had learned about it from her father back in Missouri, who once taught her how to read the land like a language. The town stopped calling her bad luck after that. Some even nodded when she passed. But Holden, he never called her anything but Oriana. One evening, weeks after she had arrived, he found her out by the barn, brushing down the old mare. "You thinking of leaving?" he asked. She looked up. "Should I be?" He stepped closer. "No," she waited. "I see the way you take care of them," he said. "Tessa and Tobias, I see how they look at you, I see how I look at you." Her fingers stilled on the brush. "You gave this place breath again," he said. "You gave me breath again." "It is not smart," she said, "to care for someone like me." "You are not bad luck," he said. "You are the reason things turned around." She turned to him then, eyes wide and wet, and he did not hesitate. He cupped her face with both hands, rough thumbs brushing her cheeks. "I want you here," he said. "Not just in the house. In my life, with us." She leaned into him. "I think I want that too." Then he kissed her slow and sure. And for the first time in years, Oriana did not flinch. The summer waned, and the air began to shift cooler in the mornings, the scent of dry grass turning rich and brittle. Oriana rose early now, before the rooster crowed, not because anyone told her to, but because the rhythm suited her. She moved through Holden's home like someone who had always been part of it, though she still tread lightly, as if afraid the floorboards might give way beneath her. Holden noticed that she never sat with her back to a door. One morning, she was rinsing jars for canning when Tessa came in from the yard with a basket full of wild plums. "They're sweeter than last year's," she said, setting them carefully on the table. "Maybe 'cause of all the rain." Oriana wiped her hands. "You've got a good eye. These'll make fine preserves." Tessa tilted her head. "Did your mama teach you that?" There was a long breath, and then Oriana said, "No, I taught myself after she passed. Figured I could either learn or live off dry bread." The girl's mouth pressed into a line. "Do you miss her?" Oriana nodded once. "Every day." Tessa climbed into the chair beside her. "I don't remember much about mine, just her voice when she sang. Papa won't sing. Says he can't carry a tune." Oriana turned toward her, brushing a plum leaf from the girl's shoulder. "Well, I can't sing worth a lick either, but I could hum while we work." Tessa grinned. "That's good enough." Later that afternoon, while Tobias napped and Tessa shelled beans out on the porch, Holden came in from the pasture, his shirt damp from hauling fence posts. Oriana stood at the sink, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair pulled back with a bit of ribbon Tessa had given her. He leaned against the doorframe without speaking. She felt him there but didn't turn until the dishes were set to dry. "You were gone longer than usual," she said. "Ran into a badger in the lower field." She raised an eyebrow, "Chased me off the fence line." Her brow lifted a little higher. "A badger," he shrugged. "Mean little thing." Her mouth twitched and his chest filled at the sight. "I'll go fill the troughs," she said, brushing past him. He stepped aside, but not before his hand caught hers for a moment, just long enough to make her still. "You've been good for them," he said. She didn't pull away. "They've been good for me." He looked at her then, not just in passing, but the way a man looks when he's settled something in his heart. "I've been thinking on building a second coop," he said. "More hens, maybe a few ducks if we can keep the creek from freezing too deep come winter." She knew what he was doing, laying plans that included her, without asking aloud if she'd stay. Her heart ached with how careful he was. "I've never raised ducks," she said. "Well, we'll learn. Same as everything else." That night after supper, the kids played in the yard, chasing fireflies with tin cups. Oriana sat on the porch, mending the seam of Tobias's only good pair of trousers. Holden whittled beside her, the soft rasp of his knife steady. "Do you miss town?" he asked, eyes on the wood. "No," she answered without hesitation. "There's nothing back there that wants me." He nodded, still carving. "You've got a way with the land. You read it like a story. My father taught me to watch for the small things. How leaves turn before a storm. Where animals bed down when they're scared. Said the earth talks if you're willing to listen." He turned the piece of wood in his hand. "What's it saying now?" She glanced out toward the horizon, where the hills folded into the dark. "That it's waiting." "For what?" "For me to believe I belong here." He set the carving down a small horse, half finished, and reached across the space between them. His fingers brushed hers, warm and calloused. "I already believe it," he said. She didn't answer, but she didn't look away either. When Tobias came running to show her the firefly trapped in his cup, she leaned down and cupped his small hand in hers, releasing the insect gently into the night. "Let it go where it wants," she told him. Holden watched them, his heart heavy in a way that felt nothing like sorrow. Inside, Oriana set the mended trousers in Tobias's drawer and paused at the doorway. There were boots by the hearth that weren't hers, coats on the peg that belonged to someone else. And yet, it all felt right, like she'd been part of this story longer than she knew. She didn't say anything when Holden stepped in behind her, but she didn't step away when his hand settled at the small of her back. The house creaked as it cooled from the day's heat. Outside, the last of the fireflies blinked out. Inside, nothing broke the quiet but the sound of two people breathing the same air, growing toward each other without needing to say what was already becoming true. By late September, the cottonwoods along the creek had turned gold, their leaves loosening like quiet farewells. Oriana stood at the edge of the field with her skirt hem gathered in one hand, watching Holden guide the team through the last furrow before frost came. The air smelled of turned soil and sun-warmed hay, and the wind carried the faint sound of Tessa singing to the chickens as she scattered feed. Holden slowed the horses near the fence line and looked up. "You reckon we've got time to get the squash in tomorrow?" She glanced toward the sky, gauging the clouds. "If we start early and don't dawdle." He grinned, his face lined with dust. "I don't dawdle. You linger," she said, a little smile pulling at the corner of her mouth. "Especially when there's pie cooling." He walked the team toward the barn and she followed, carrying a length of rope he'd left near the gate. Inside, the animals stirred with the scent of coming cold, restless and watchful. Oriana leaned against the stall post, arms crossed as Holden unhitched the harness. "You always this quiet when seasons change?" she asked. He hung the bridle, then turned to face her. "Autumn always makes me feel like I'm holding something I can't keep." She nodded, understanding more than she said. "I used to think that too. Now I think maybe it's just reminding us to be gentle with time." Holden brushed hay from his shirt. "You've got a way of saying things that makes me stop and listen. I've had enough silence to know what's worth saying." He stepped closer, not touching, but near enough that she could feel the warmth of him in the narrowing space. "You think about what comes next." She looked down at her hands, the skin toughened from the work, the fingers steadier than they used to be. "I try not to look too far ahead." "I do," he said. "Not to chase it, just to know what I'm building toward." She met his eyes, soft and steady. "And what are you building toward?" He didn't answer right away, just reached past her for the feed bucket, his arm brushing hers. "A life that don't feel like it waits for something to go wrong." That night, after the children were asleep and the house had settled into its hush, Oriana brought in the last of the herbs from the porch to hang in the kitchen rafters. She worked by lamplight, tying them in neat bundles, her movements sure. Holden came in from the lean-to, unbuttoning his cuffs. "You always this careful with things." She hung the last bunch of sage. "If you want something to last, you treat it like it matters." He leaned against the wall. I used to think some things just got taken from you, no matter how careful you are. Sometimes they do, she said without turning, but sometimes you get to choose again, and that's harder. He stepped closer, his voice low. Would you choose this? If I asked, she turned then, slowly, meeting him fully for the first time that night. You're not asking. I'm trying to do it right, he said. Not rush what's growing, she nodded. Then let it grow. But don't let it sit too long in the dark. He touched her wrist, thumb tracing the spot where her pulse beat steady. When it's time, I'll ask plain. I'll answer plain, she said. Outside, the wind picked up through the trees, rustling what was left of the leaves. The lamp flickered. He let go of her wrist, not out of fear but out of respect. She didn't step back. Later, when she lay in bed beneath a quilt Tessa had insisted she use, she heard Holden's footsteps cross the floor below. He paused outside her door, didn't knock, didn't speak. Just stood there for a moment, then walked away. She closed her eyes, her chest full of something quiet and certain, something that asked for nothing more than time and care. Downstairs, Holden took the wooden carving from the shelf, the horse he'd started weeks ago, and set it on the table. He picked up his knife, and this time he worked to finish it. The first frost came overnight, silvering the fields and crisping the air until the breath curled white from every mouth. Oriana stepped outside at dawn with a shawl wrapped tight and a bucket swinging at her side. The chickens clucked low in their roost. Feathers puffed against the cold, and she worked quietly, scattering feed and checking the water basins for ice. Holden had left early for the North Ridge to cut back a wind-felled pine. He'd taken Tobias in the wagon, bundled in wool and wide-eyed with the thrill of being useful. Tessa stayed behind willingly, her arms full of lessons and her mind fixed on finishing a story she was writing out in careful pencil lines. Inside, the house was warm from the stove, and the smell of lye soap still clung faintly to the floorboards from Oriana's morning scrubbing. She hung her shawl by the door, reached for the tin of flour, and began kneading dough for the noon meal. Tessa looked up from the kitchen table. Did you ever have a birthday cake? Oriana paused, her hands deep in the dough. Once. I was 6. It had plum jam between the layers. The girl bit her pencil. I want to make one for Papa. When's his birthday? Next Sunday. Oriana set the dough aside to rise. Then we'll need eggs, sugar, and something special to flavor it. Maybe dried apple. Tessa's eyes lit with purpose. I'll trade Mrs. Ellsworth a basket of kindling for sugar. You're bartering now, she says. I've got a clever tongue. Oriana smiled without showing teeth, then reached for the tin pie plate. We'll make him a cake he won't forget. That afternoon, they walked into town together, Tessa balancing the kindling basket like a prize. The air held a sharpness that hinted at snow. Most folks along Main Street nodded now when they passed, some even offering quiet greetings. Oriana returned them without lingering. At the general store, Tessa made her trade, and the storekeeper gave her an extra scoop of flour, in case the cake wants to grow tall. Oriana thanked him with a simple nod and turned before any more could be said. Outside, just as they were loading the parcel into the wagon bed, a voice called out from across the street. You're Holden's woman, aren't you? Oriana turned, her spine straightening. A man leaned against the livery post, hat low, hands tucked into his coat. His face was unfamiliar, but the look in his eyes wasn't. I live out on his land, she said. You're the one they said brought that fire. Tessa's grip tightened around the sugar sack. Oriana stepped between them. Wasn't me brought it, just happened near me. The man shrugged. Funny how trouble likes company. Oriana didn't answer. She took Tessa's hand and climbed onto the wagon bench. As they rode out of town, Tessa kept quiet until the trees swallowed the road. Why do people think you're bad? Some folks need a reason when things go wrong, Oriana said. And if a woman's alone, she's an easy one to name. Papa says names don't stick unless you let him. Oriana looked down at the girl beside her, her cheeks wind-stung and stubborn. Then I guess I won't let them. By the time the men returned that evening, the table was set with rabbit stew and warm cornbread. Tobias ran straight to Oriana, holding up a pine cone. I found this for you. It's got sap on it still. She took it carefully, setting it by the windowsill. Then it's good luck. Holden washed up at the basin, his shoulders heavy from the day's work. She handed him a towel, the corner still damp from her own hands. Tree come down clean, she asked. Half the root ball went with it. Took the better part of the morning. He looked at her then, not hurried, not expectant. Just eyes meeting hers in the quiet rhythm they'd fallen into after supper while the children played with the carved animals on the rug. Holden stepped onto the porch. Oriana followed, drawing her shawl around her shoulders. The stars hung low and sharp, and the night carried the scent of wood smoke and distant snow. I saw a man in town today, she said. Asked if I was yours. Holden's jaw worked once before he answered. What you tell him? That I live on your land, he nodded slowly. You could have said more. I didn't need to. He looked out toward the dark slope of the hills. You think you'll stay? I'm not looking to leave, he exhaled, slow and sure. Then maybe it's time I asked. She turned toward him. I never thought I'd feel steady again, he said. Losing her, it hollowed me out. Oriana waited. But with you in this house, I don't feel like I'm holding on too tight to something already gone. I feel like I'm building something new. With you. Her hands stayed at her sides, but her voice held no hesitation. I'd stand beside you, Holden Vance, if you asked. I am asking. Then I am saying yes. They didn't kiss then, not yet. Just stood together on the porch, the cold air threading between them, the rest of the world falling away like old bark from a tree. Inside, the children laughed over something small. The sound carried through the walls like a promise, and for the first time, no one called her bad luck. She was just Oriana, and this was her home. The first snow came soft and early, blanketing the ridge before sunup and settling in the pine hollows like it had always meant to stay. Tessa pressed her nose to the window and whispered something to Tobias, who ran to find his mittens with the urgency only a child waking to snow could carry. Oriana stirred the morning oats, the fire already built high, her shawl traded for Holden's old wool coat that fit her arms more comfortably than she liked to admit. Holden came in from the barn with a flurry of cold behind him, brushing snow from his collar. Tobias says we're building a fort, he said, teeth white against the red of his cheeks. He's already rolled the first ball, Oriana said, handing him a tin cup. Tessa's overseeing operations. He drank, then looked over the rim. You coming out? I told them I'd help after breakfast. He set the cup down. I've got something I want to show you first. She followed him out past the barn, their boots crunching a narrow trail through the snow. The horses stood quiet under the lean-to, steam rising from their flanks. He led her past the split-rail fence, beyond the slope where the creek narrowed and curled behind the hill. The ground dipped there, and nestled in a windbreak of cedar stood a small, unfinished structure, new beams, half-sided, with the scent of fresh-cut pine hanging in the cold air. She stopped short. What is this? He turned toward her, gloves tucked under one arm. It's for you, for us. She stepped forward, the snow nearly to her calves. You built this, started it after you said yes. She ran a hand along one of the smooth corner posts. It's solid. Figured we could finish it together. Add a hearth, a loft for the children. It's close enough to the main house for now, but far enough to make it ours. She looked up at him, the breath catching behind her ribs. And what would we call it? He grinned. Home. She didn't answer with words. just reached for his gloved hand and pressed it to her chest where her heart beat steady and strong. They spent the next weeks finishing the walls, working side by side in the brittle air, the hammer and saw shaping more than timber. Tessa and Tobias helped where they could, carrying nails in small pouches and dragging cedar boughs to line the roof. Oriana laid the stones for the hearth herself, her father's lessons alive in her fingers. Holden carved the mantel, each edge smooth with care. The day the stove was set, they moved the feather mattresses and wool quilts from the children's rooms. Tessa insisted on placing her storybook beside the oil lamp. Tobias carried in the pine cone Oriana had kept on the windowsill. That night, as the fire glowed low and the wind curled around the eaves, Holden stood with her in the doorway, the children already asleep in the loft above. "You sure?" he asked. She turned to him, her hair braided back, her eyes lit with something that had taken root long before she'd let it bloom. "I've never been more certain." He drew her close, his hands firm at her waist. "Then we'll begin here." She kissed him, not as a question, but as a vow. The winter passed with deep snow and warm hearths. Tessa's cake had been a success, slightly lopsided but sweet, and Holden had kept the dried apple peel in his pocket for a week afterward, until it turned brittle and curled like a ribbon. Tobias learned to read his first sentence by the firelight, sounding out each word with his tongue stuck between his teeth. Oriana laughed more easily now, her voice low and sure, her hands always busy but never rushed. Come spring, the creek swelled with meltwater, and the trees leafed out so fast it seemed the land had been holding its breath all winter. Oriana planted herbs behind the new porch, her palms dark with soil, her back strong from the months of labor. Holden built her a bench there just wide enough for two. They married beneath the cottonwood near the edge of the pasture, where the grass grew tall and the wind could still carry a secret. Tessa wore her mother's ribbon in her braid. Tobias dropped half the wildflowers before reaching the altar. Reverend Sims said the vows with an extra pause between each line, just long enough for the weight of them to settle when Oriana said, "I do." She looked only at Holden. When he said it back, he didn't blink. That night, after the neighbors had gone and the moon rose full over the hills, they sat alone on the porch, their fingers intertwined, the silence between them full of peace. "I used to think I wasn't meant for this," she said. He looked at her, his thumb brushing the back of her hand. "You were meant. You just hadn't found it yet." She leaned her head against his shoulder and closed her eyes, and he, who had once thought his life had ended with a winter loss, now knew it had only been a beginning. The children slept soundly upstairs. The fire burned low. And their house stood strong against the night, built by hand, by hope, and by the slow, steady work of love. Years later, when gray threaded through Holden's beard and laugh lines deepened around Oriana's eyes, the land still held them. The orchard they planted bore sweet fruit. The bench on the porch weathered but never broke, and every morning before the day began, Holden would set a cup of coffee at her side and say, "Still glad you stayed." She'd smile, press her lips to his cheek, and answer, "Always."